thank you all very much for coming. We have a very interesting lineup of speakers for our session. We have people present with us, whom I'll introduce as the session goes on. We will have two people speaking to us in pre-recorded videos, and we will have three people speaking with us live online. And welcome to those who are going to be speaking to us online. They are coming in from other time zones. It's quite late in North America, where two of our speakers are, and it's, I think, the middle of the night in Europe, where one of our speakers is. So I'm very grateful to all of you for agreeing to participate. So I'd like to start by setting the stage for our discussion today. The world is facing a climate crisis. The failure to keep the average global temperature rise to less than 2 degrees Celsius will send us past the tipping point at which accelerating irreversible changes will occur in the Earth's climate and ecological systems, hugely disrupting our societies and potentially threatening the very viability of human life. The built environment is responsible for almost 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. A large part of this is attributable to the residential sector, with the share varying from one country to another. One can't make a global statement because it depends on a country's climate and its economic status, how much energy the residential sector is consuming, and therefore what its emissions count is. But it's indisputable that reducing the use of fossil fuels to heat and cool our homes, to cite only the largest energy uses in a house, because of course there are others, will be critical to reducing the world's GHG emissions and staving off environmental disaster. Yet, there are forces pressing in the opposite direction. Demand for cooling is already rising in response to a warming climate and will increase as people across the globe try to cope with rising outdoor temperatures. Meanwhile, many people in the world still lack adequate heat in the colder seasons. Testing the readiness of citizens to stay on the path to moving to renewable energy sources, a more rapid than expected economic recovery following the pandemic is putting a strain on world energy supplies, sending up energy prices just as winter looms in the northern hemisphere. So, where do cooperatives fit into this picture? The 7th cooperative principle, concern for community, demands that we do our part to address the climate emergency. The 6th principle, cooperation among cooperatives, invites cooperatives to better serve their members through sharing information and knowledge and working together in other ways. Can housing cooperatives be instrumental in providing clean, affordable energy to their members? Are there opportunities for collaboration with cooperatives in the energy sector? Our panelists today will explore what can be done to ensure that members of cooperatives and the wider community alike can enjoy a tolerable home environment while the associated GHG emissions are dramatically reduced and ultimately eliminated. So if we can have the first video. This is a video interview with a man named Dirk Vansen-Jan. He's been fighting for a citizen-based energy transition since he co-founded the renewable energy cooperative EcoPower in 1991. EcoPower promotes the development of renewable energy in Belgium. They're both an energy producer and a distributor, operating 24 wind turbines, 3 hydropower plants, and 300 photovoltaic plants that together yield 90 gigawatt hours of electricity. Dirk is also the president and co-founder of ResCoop EU, the European Federation of Renewable energy cooperatives. So we're going to hear a few words if the video is ready. First from Dirk.
It's a whole range of activities that are solar and wind, most of them work basically of new opportunities. So we have to electrify the sector. So more projects and focus that use the geothermal energy but also of rivers and lakes, aquathermic projects, or the heat or the temperature in sewers. So we call it rheothermy. So there are all kinds of energy sources that can be used in district heating. And yeah, apart from that, there's also biomass being used. So there are several villages in Germany, for instance, or also in Belgium, that use residues from forestry to heat to fuel a district heating system in a village. Yeah,
we have seen tremendous growth, although it's been in.
Now we're going to hear from Shido from Korea. Shido is chairperson of Minsnail Housing Co-op, and she's been living in snail houses for 5 years. As a young adult, she's working to address the hardships faced by youth, including the lack of affordable housing. She's acted to bring about institutional change by working in supportive organizations such as Seoul City Youth Hub and Seoul City Youth Activity Support. Shido is going to speak to us in Korean, so it's time to put your earpieces on. And we'll need Shido's presentation, please.
Hello. My name is Shido. I'm the director and chairperson of the Minsnail Housing Co-op. As introduced, the Minsnail Housing Co-op is works to provide affordable housing to youths. And a minsnail means a snail without the house on it. So it's been 7 years now since we started. And we are now operating 17 housing units for youths. And the youths who are our clients as well as our members are very sensitive to climate change and other environmental issues. And we want to go beyond being tenants of housing to become tenants of this earth that we have rented from future generations. When we create when we lead co-ops to create these housing, we only own one of them, and the rest we are renting out. So we don't have sufficient capital, but we want to. We are the starting point of a long-term project to provide sustainable energy to our to housing. For example, we have started installing solar panels in the buildings when they are owned by the co-op, and we are providing parking space for car sharing cars. And the profits we make from operating the car park is returned to the community and to our co-op members. And so we have a membership-based community that we have created, and we come together to propose ways to foster low carbon activities to respond to climate change. And so we call this gathering the Green Snail Gathering, and we are proposing to our members living rules. We created them ourselves, green rules to protect the environment, and we share books and movies on the climate crisis, and we have on and offline workshops to create more environmentally friendly products. Like, for example, if we want to buy a bamboo toothbrush because we want to be more environmentally friendly, but if we don't have a store that sells this near our house, near our homes, then we'll have to order it and get it delivered, and that will emit carbon again. So we are doing pilot projects, and our members propose this. So we try to reuse shampoo bottles and other bottles, and we make the bamboo toothbrushes and other environmentally friendly products on our own. And of course, a lot of our co-op members were open to these ideas and were willing to voluntarily adopt such living habits in their lives. But it's not very easy to do this, and we have to bear with some inconveniences. And so we wanted to sell environmentally friendly products, and we realized that if the members manned the stores, there was greater sales. So if there is interest and passion of the co-op members, we make more profits, and we strengthen our values as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shido. That's quite an inspiring example, and it shows the importance of reducing our energy consumption, because let's agree that there are too many people on the planet who think that a kind of technological solution will come along, and those of us who live in countries that are big energy hogs can carry on being energy hogs. So your example, where members of your co-op are trying to reduce their own footprint and take responsibility for the wider world, is very inspiring. We're going to hear now from Guido Schwarzendahl, and Guido comes to us from Germany. He's a member of the board of Cooperative Housing International, and has been since 2013, and serves as vice president. In his day job, he's the managing director of a large housing cooperative in Halle, Germany. He's worked there for 20 years. Halle owns and operates some 7,500 units of rental housing on behalf of its members in more than 200 buildings. So opposite end of the scale from Ms. Nell. Go ahead, Guido, please.
Yes. Good morning, and thank you for this introduction, Alexandra. I will make a presentation to an energetic water concept at our cooperative. We are a rental cooperative, and a few words to our building stock in this cooperative. As our cooperative is already 111 years old, we have a very broad building stock. And in this building stock, 3/4 of our buildings are already energetically modernized. 1/4 is partially modernized, also with energetic aspects or under energetic aspects, and less than 1% is now without any modernization. And due to our broad building stock, and this reaches from the ages more than 500 years old to actual buildings, you can see them on these pictures. We have a very deep experience in energetic refurbishment of residential buildings. Very important, or an important issue for us, is the heating systems at the cooperative. We are focused on savings of greenhouse gas emissions. And so we have one principle: our dwellings have to meet the standards of energy saving, but they must also be, on the other hand, affordable and reliable for our members. And we will manage this by using district heating. That's the first column here on the graph. More than 60% of our buildings are with district heating. And at the end of the graph, the abbreviation BHKW means cogeneration. That is more than 10% already in our building stock. And we are very proud that we have already a saving of carbon dioxide emissions of 62%. And only, by the way, the goal in Germany of saving carbon dioxide emissions is actually 55% to the year 2030. So we already meet that 10 years before and even a little bit more. To come to the point of the energetic quarter concept at our cooperative, you now see here pictures of our Lutherviertel neighborhood. It's the biggest single neighborhood we own. It was erected in the 1930s, and there are nearly 1,200 dwellings. What we have done there is we implemented cogeneration. So you see at the picture the cogeneration unit, and we built up a local heat grid for the biggest part of the neighborhood, and we replaced the central gas heating systems and can now produce heat, warm water, and electricity. And we can save operating expenses more than nearly 20% for our tenants and members here in this neighborhood. And we do that by selling the electricity, because that can lower the price for heating and warm water. But that's not all we do. We do a lot more. So you see here pictures of a wildflower meadow, and this wildflower meadow is very important, not only for more insects diversity, but also for raised evaporation to prevent summer heat islands. Because the experience for us, where especially in the very hot summers, I do think all over the world, 2018 and 2019, that we have to lower the summer temperature in our flats. So Germany is not used to air condition in the flats, and so we need good or tolerable temperatures even in summer, and we do that by fresh air aids and by re-landscaping. That means infiltration swales, and only by the way, the swales and water, as you can see here at the exemplary pictures, are a wonderful playground also for the neighborhood, and we can realize that in the inner courtyards. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Another very inspiring case study. Now, we should have with us online, there she is, great, Anna Dokic. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Anna is an architect with over 20 years of experience pioneering unconventional approaches to the challenges of contemporary urban development. She's the founding director of the first housing cooperative established in Belgrade in the last 20 years. Anna, a member of the management board of the European Cooperative Society, MOBA Housing. She's also one of the founders of the energy cooperative Electrification in Belgrade, Serbia, a pioneer in small-scale solar. So Anna has a foot in both camps, energy co-ops and housing cooperatives. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks a lot. In regards from the middle of the night. I will share my screen now. So indeed, I'm speaking here from the position of two sides, both the housing cooperatives and energy cooperatives. And I will just very briefly present these two initiatives that I'm part of. The first one is the European Cooperative Society, which operates in the Central and Southeast Europe, which is presented here on the small map down right. And we exist since 2017. The aim of MOBA is to create an institutional framework that enables lower income households to collectively access affordable housing. And one of the things that we do is also to create channels for finance for cooperative housing in our part of Europe. And I have to say that all these housing cooperatives that are part of MOBA are pioneering and the first ones of their kind in this part of the world. We are initiating a new kind of cooperatives different than from what existed before in terms also of ownership where housing is collectively owned, not privately owned. In the context where housing provision is market-led, public housing makes a very small percentage of housing in our part of the world, only 1 to 5%. And unregulated private rental is a norm. There is a lack of legal and financial support framework. And in this part of the world, we target to create this collective ownership with rental levels at an average 60% of market prices. And some of the cooperatives that are part of MOBA are realizing or preparing actually to realize new projects, while the others are working in already existing buildings. And now on the other side of energy cooperatives, an Electropioneer is the second actually energy cooperative in Serbia. It exists since end of 2019, works on empowering citizens to actively participate in the energy transition in Serbia and demonstrate that it is possible to produce electricity in an environmentally and economically sustainable way under the cooperative principles. And as you can see on this map on down left, there is a big number of energy cooperatives existing in Northwest and Northern Europe, while the Eastern Europe and Southeastern part of Europe is rather empty. And this is the let's say, the context in which we operate. And at the moment, there are first attempts to actually grow a network in connections in Central and Southeastern Europe to connect actually energy cooperatives. Now what is interesting is this combination, of course, of these two. And one of the things that MOBA is working on, and also hopefully soon in relation to energy cooperatives from our part of the world, is actually addressing climate urgency and energy transition, where energy cooperatives meet community-led cooperative housing to reach benchmark results as pioneering highly motivated agents of change to radically reduce a footprint per tenant, like through energy use, CO2, and use of space, which is basically reduce demand and significantly reduce living costs and be in control by the end users.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Now we're going to hear from Thomas Boisvert-Saint-Arnaud. Thomas is from Quebec in Canada, and he also has a foot in multiple camps. So he's a founding member of the Poisson Entité Cooperative, a cooperative and hydroponic urban farm of agricultural workers. He's an entrepreneur, a cooperator, and business researcher who seeks to better understand how governance can help create value. His expertise includes organizational strategy, the social economy, digital transformation, real estate, and renewable energy. He sounds well equipped to deal with our contemporary world. Over to you, Thomas.
안녕하세요. Okay, here. So today it will be only a quick overview of a project of two co-ops working together. An indoor farm providing heating and hot water to a housing co-op. So it's only a small pilot project of 16 units. It's one of the first multi-dwelling co-op that's net zero in Canada and the first in Quebec for sure. It's also a community project. So all the members took their money and bought a land through a community land trust. and are really working hard to make that project happen. What's special about it maybe is like there's also solar panels so to help achieve the net zero project on top of the building. The thing that's special, in the basement there's an indoor farm, which is a co-op as well. So it's a ferme entité co-op, which is a hydroponic farm that produces throughout the year green leaves and herbs. And we use heat waste recovery to warm the water and heat the building. It was a huge technical challenges. There's not a lot of net zero building, as we said earlier. It's heat waste recovery is a bit of a technical challenge. So we use intercooperation to make people work together. It's not the theme of our presentation, but it's like a co-op, energy co-op worker that helped us design the building, and with the architect and with a lot of the experts, we made that thing happen through cooperation. Even with the organization that were in cooperation, we really bring intercooperation outside of our boundaries. It's also a project that really involved the community. So we were there at every step of the conception. And it's even the members, like the expert that had the idea to recover waste energy to heat the building. So it wasn't the expert who had the idea. So we really work with a systemic approach, which gave us like a really solid base to start up that ambitious project. So the project is well underway, and there's a lot of demands throughout Canada and even to world to replicate it. So we've been working with Inuit communities, with the people around Quebec, to use that project. We can warm water, we can even put energy in another industrial process, and it's a good way to keep costs very low. It's also very interesting for indoor farming because excess wheat is normally like just extracted in the neighborhoods with create a lot of health public problems. So yeah. So finally, I really believe that cooperation is the business model to tackle climate change. So I'm really happy to have the chance to discuss with my friends here about solution and things. And I really hope that you will help us and ask questions and so we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Most interesting and opens our eyes to other forms of collaboration that we can explore among different types of cooperatives. So thank you for that. Next, we're going to see a video clip. We had Sem Oxenar from Res Co-op speak to us on camera. He's been working for Res Co-op for the past year on citizen-led renovation projects. Previously, he was an advisor and researcher at DRIFT, an institute focused on sustainability transitions at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. In his new role, Sam is working on sustainable renovation with energy cooperatives all over Europe. So we'll have a couple of video clips of Sam, and then we're going to go back to a video clip of Dirk, whom I've already presented. So we'll have, if our technicians can bring up the video clips, we've got 3, we'll watch them one after another. Thank you.
We have seen tremendous growth, although it's been in different countries. So, for example, in my home country of the Netherlands, we've seen a huge uptake of energy communities, up to almost 800 now, whereas maybe a decade ago there were almost none. But then in other countries, more like Central or Eastern Europe, we would have liked to see many more groups coming up. I think, or at least I hope, it's a sign of more people becoming aware of the urgency or wanting to do something around climate change or be involved in energy at a local level. So I think the motivations are different, but I think people are starting to realize that this is a model that helps them really become active in their local environment in a very practical way. and something that maybe also makes it very tangible for people if they want to do something or be involved in the energy transition. So I think maybe to start, it's to look at what's the motivation behind it. So citizen-led renovation is basically energy cooperatives giving renovation advice and support, not only to their members, but basically to everyone in their community. So it's open to everyone. And the goal is primarily to increase the energy efficiency of the home, which will, of course, reduce your emissions and reduce your energy bills. But it also gives you a much more comfortable home, and so meaning less draft, less mold and moisture. So also really improvements in the living quality of the home. And maybe one example of an initiative we're working a lot with is Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative. They're located in a rural area in Ireland. And they basically started with renovations to help develop their local communities, which were declining and people were moving away. So this was a way for them also to help the economic development of their community. And they grouped together to offer, for example, the installation of heat pumps or giving advice to households on how to insulate, how to better ventilate and prevent moisture. And then they also grouped households together so that they could together do an application with the national government for funding, for grant support. And this made it much easier for households because it's quite difficult to do all this administration by yourself. So in this way, the service is really about, on the one hand, awareness and advice, but on the other hand, also really on practical support in, okay, what measures can you take? How can you do this? Where can you maybe find a contractor who can do the measure? And then also, how can you finance this? And can you also get government subsidies for this? So this is one of the initiatives we're working with, but they vary a lot in the type of service they offer. So some only offer advice, while others will help households really throughout the entire renovation journey and really what they call offer a one-stop shop service, really that takes care of everything for you.
Well, what our message is to all authorities and also to our colleagues of the housing cooperatives is actually energy is crucial not only for energy cooperatives but for all cooperatives. And when we turn away from centralized production to decentralized production and from fossil fuels and nuclear fuel to renewables, the key to the success of this transition is that the profits stay as local as possible, that production units are not owned once more by big utilities who take away the profits, but that the money stays local, that they invest, that local people invest in these installations, and that the profits stay local. And then the money doesn't flow out of the economy anymore, of the local economy, out of the community, but it accumulates. And we see that our members who are doing this, the energy cooperatives who are doing this, they take up other roles outside of their, let's say, their sector. So they invest in the community. It might be a community center, or it might be a kindergarten, or so they are helping their members insulate their homes. They set up projects to fight energy poverty. And I think we are ideal partners, the housing cooperatives and the energy cooperatives, to especially in Europe with very old houses. It's an enormous work we have to do in the coming few decades to insulate all these homes, to replace heating by fuel and by gas with heating with heat pumps and district heating. So we're actually condemned to work together.
Now, do we have Aaron Thornell with us online? If Aaron,
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, excellent, Aaron.
Aaron.
Good. I'll just introduce you briefly and then invite you to make your presentation. Aaron is from Ottawa, where I happen to be from, in Canada. He is the customer and member manager of both the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative and Co-Energy Cooperative. He's responsible for member and investor management, project development, and overall operations of both cooperatives. Located in Ottawa, where he lives in a housing cooperative, Aaron is passionate about the role that the cooperative model can play in addressing climate, social, and economic challenges and inequities. ORC is one of the largest renewable energy cooperatives in Canada, comprising 21 solar PV projects and 2 wind turbines, with a total generating capacity of 6.3 megawatts. So you can see that Canada has some catching up to do with Europe. But over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Salvatore. How this
There we go. So thank you all for having me this evening for listening in from. As Alexander mentioned, her and I hail from the same city of Ottawa, so it's a real pleasure to talk to you today about the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative. You know, really our group, it's very inspirational to be speaking, at least in part, alongside really in the Netherlands and Belgium and different parts of Western Europe were extremely foundational and inspirational to co-founding members of OREC back in 2010. It was really borrowing from that model of the sort of community power, localized energy production that OREC got its start. And so at the core, what OREC serves to do is to connect its cooperative members with impactful renewable energy projects in their own communities, and in doing so really sort of emphasize the importance of local ownership, the importance of keeping energy dollars local, and also increasing the energy democracy overall of how we produce our power and where we get it from. So broadly speaking, OREC follows a very similar trajectory to some of the other speakers you've heard this evening who work with other energy cooperatives. But we play very hands-on role in developing our projects. So we work directly with hosts. In some cases we're working with schools, museums, other public sector entities, and also private sector entities, as well as housing cooperatives and affordable housing providers. We work to identify project opportunities, to develop those to a certain stage, and then we go about financing through community finance mechanisms. So we design and have regulators check over our own investment products, allow them to verify their soundness, for lack of a better term, and that's where we are where we give them the chance to invest in these projects, to learn about these projects, to have a say in how those projects will be developed, and for that sort of cooperative mechanism to sort of really hit full stride. We take that investment capital and put it directly into these projects, and in so doing, make all of our members really co-owners of these renewable energy generating stations. We then use that, development capital either through the different procurement programs set up by different governments here in Canada and Ontario, or through direct relationships with the project hosts themselves. We then return those revenues to our members in the form of dividends or other forms of financial returns on an annual basis. So this is all very well and good, and we've been very happy with the success we've seen over the last decade or so. But of course, here in Ontario, and even other parts of Canada, we do have relatively clean electricity grids. And so, as Dirk mentioned in one of his videos there, and as other folks have mentioned, it's really a matter of electrification. So here, our built environment and housing is probably the most, I guess, obvious example of this. Much of our buildings with fossil fuels, natural gas being sort of the most common here in urban environments. going forward, I think, for our group and for others, away from those fossil fuels and finding ways to electrify using clean energy to power those electrically heated homes or cooled homes for that matter. So what have we done to address this? Well, part of it is continuing to work with groups to install more clean energy, but also to look at what other models might be salient or helpful to accelerating and catalyzing deep energy retrofits. So working with housing cooperatives directly to identify opportunities for electrification or for retrofit or for both, and then sharing that with on-site renewable energy generation where appropriate. So really, it's taking a much more wholesome look at the opportunities within our built environment, helping them identify what programs might be able to support them, and then also bringing our community financing to bear on those projects, and bring them to fruition with technical support as well. So ultimately, this is where we see ourselves headed. It's a slow process. We've sort of been doing a lot of rinse and repeat with the renewable energy side of things for a long time, for rooftop solar specifically. And, we're sort of slowly teaching ourselves how it is to operate in a slightly different settings. So as a couple folks have already mentioned this evening or today, the opportunity here is not just to create more clean energy or lower the carbon emissions, I guess, of these facilities, but really to create affordable and living spaces. So when we think about electrification, sometimes I guess speaking from a Canadian context, resistance based on presumed cost increases, cost of living increases, but I think we're ultimately seeing this is not a case, and when done properly, it doesn't have to be the case. There may be short-term, financing opportunities to help get these projects up and off the ground, as well as longer financial instruments that can support these facilities and taking on these sort of fulsome deep energy retrofits that are going to create better spaces. So working with housing cooperatives and all kinds of partners, really, I think part of my work is really focused on how can we outline what these benefits entail. So not just talking about sustainability, which is of course important to our group and to our members, but also talking about the social and economic benefits that exist to be able to sort of create that sort of big tent unit, I guess, buy-in, for lack of a better term, among the constituents, among the stakeholders, among the members of the housing cooperatives that we're working with. Also important as part of this process is identifying when in the sort of cycle these kinds of projects make sense. So, the classic example is when a housing co-op is thinking about doing other kinds of building refurbishments or upgrades, take that opportunity to insert some deep energy retrofit measures or some clean energy or waste heat recapture measures or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a lot to be said about the opportunities that exist between renewable energy cooperatives or energy cooperatives and, of course, the housing cooperative sector. As I mentioned, I myself live in a housing cooperative, so working to bring more to bear in my building environment and share with our members is something that is a work in progress, I would say. But forming the kinds of committees or working with the housing cooperatives that bring in that industry expertise to be able to expand the knowledge of the membership, and then when the opportunity comes available, be it through federal support programs or other kinds of opportunities, and the housing co-op and its members and board of directors will be all the more ready to jump at the opportunity. So I'll pass it back over to you, Alexandra, for now, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Your mention of your own housing cooperative reminds me of an initiative that we took in that same housing co-op when I lived there. To wait till you hear this, to replace the air makeup system, which was run on electricity, with a system run on natural gas. And of course, this was 30 years ago, and our whole perspective was the cost to the members, and we just did not have an eye out to environmental considerations at all. So I cringe whenever I think of that. So there's a lot of work to be done in housing cooperatives to bring the climate crisis forcibly to the members' attention and to take the necessary steps to reduce, ultimately eliminate our GHG emissions. We're going to turn now to David Avina. David is with the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board in the United States. They're based in, I believe, in Manhattan, in New York. And he's their assistant director. He coordinates energy services programs and other technical assistance work within the member services department at UHAB, providing cost savings and useful tools to the community of what are, this is a very specific American phenomenon, limited equity housing development fund corporation co-ops, so HDFC co-ops in New York City. New York City has all kinds of housing cooperatives developed over a long period of time under many different government initiatives or independently of government. This is a very particular segment, and David will tell you a little bit more about that. But what he's doing is helping co-ops capture incentives. So wherever they may be available, government, utilities, that kind of thing, for energy efficiency measures. And he works with co-ops to install solar panels through a campaign they have going called Co-ops Go Solar. UHAB is a very special organization. It has done, frankly, phenomenal work in working with racialized communities and low-income people in Manhattan. And what they're doing in the energy area is pretty inspiring. But I won't steal any more of your thunder. David, I'll let you speak. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Let me get that screen here.
Yes, just say a bit more so we can tell whether we can hear you well.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? Am I good? Maybe a little bit of an echo?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for having me. I'll be giving a brief overview of what you have, but also the HDFC cooperative community that we work with. And it sounds like it might be a useful overview from my introduction. In the early 1970s, government disinvestment from neighborhoods in New York City, coupled with widespread landlord neglect and abandonment, gave rise to squatting, urban homesteading, and other forms of self-help housing. Residents took control of their city-owned land and buildings and developed or rehabilitated their own housing. The ultimate goal was, for many of the tenant associations in this movement, was to take their buildings out of the speculative housing market and own them collectively and democratically. Today, around 1,300 resident-controlled low-income housing cooperatives exist in New York City, providing some of the most deeply affordable and stable housing in New York City. The Urban Homesteading Assistance Board, or UHAB, grew out of this self-help movement. UHAB, our mission statement is to help empower low to moderate income residents to take control of their housing and enhance communities by creating strong tenant associations and lasting co-ops. We do this in a variety of different ways through technical assistance, in budgeting, or even loan packaging with either public or private loan products. We also do a whole lot of training and education. The biggest thing is knowledge sharing, especially with the different sectors that we work in, with co-op reservation and even in the renewable energy sector. There's still a lot of education needs to be had. But we also do that sort of pre-development work to even become a co-op. So we do shareholder and tenant organizing with different buildings. And we're also starting to dive into our own loan packaging products. So we're trying to help low-income folks buy into the co-ops that we help run, not own, but we help preserve those co-ops. And so we're really helping HDFC from A to Z, everything that's going on with them. So next slide. Oops. But today, after about more than 40 years, we're still serving the co-op community. In our member services department in particular, we've developed a couple of services in response to the needs of the co-op community. From our bulk purchasing program to marketing development and educational rollout. We have tailored services to help our co-op flourish. My role in particular is to help my team administer energy services to our HDFC co-ops. This includes, but it's not limited to, helping with general and sustainability consulting, local law compliance services, budgeting, and long-term capital planning for projects ranging from solar panels, heat pumps, and simple LED light upgrades. Right. We're a small team. Our nonprofit is around 30 people. My team itself is only around 3 or 4 people. And we're serving thousands of cooperators in New York City, right? About 1,300 HDFCs, and each on average have around 20 units. So that's a whole lot of people that we're helping. But our efforts will be famous, especially with partnerships of community-based organizations, utilities, and different city agencies. A lot of times we're not the experts in everything, and so it's crucial for us to partner up with those that are and able to give us the expertise and sort of trickle down the knowledge from the experts and the academics down to the normal person working the 9 to 5, just trying to live in their home, right? Oops. Sorry about that. But the context of our work is definitely based within what Alexandra was talking about from the beginning. It's based within the climate change crisis, right? Just like in other parts of the world, climate change affects some people more than others. In New York City in particular, climate change manifests in urban heat island caused by excessive greenhouse gas emissions. As a matter of fact, in New York City, 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions do come from buildings. These maps show air pollution concentration, that's on the left, and heat vulnerability index on the right. The white dots are all the HDFC co-ops that we know of, and the obvious overlap between these air pollution and the heat vulnerability just points to the disproportionate effects of climate change in these different communities of color, low-income communities, and those with less political power. So the disproportionate effects of climate change are super important to focus on when talking about the housing solutions for the shareholders themselves. Among the 1,300 HDFCs in New York City that we work with, a large number of the buildings are on heating oil, and the majority are also older than 60 years old. That's old enough to have broken windows and decaying roofs and other things that comes with a 4-season climate that sort of really hits hard on some of these buildings, on some of these older buildings. And the older building stock also means that the machinery in the building, so the boiler, the building envelope, the electrical wiring itself as well, is reaching the end of its life. But this is definitely an opportunity to change, for change. The renewable technologies rather, like solar panels and heat pumps can be coupled with the cost efficiency measures to help maximize the dollar saved, right? Energy efficiency in general lowers the building's operating costs, allowing the building to operate in affordability, ideally in perpetuity. And the larger sort of moral imperatives to try to lower the energy burden in communities of color. And we see these different challenges as opportunities, and HDFCs are no stranger to challenges or even just climate action itself. Residents of Hartstone HDFC, it's a co-op in the Lower East Side neighborhood in Manhattan. They took control of their energy and installed New York City's first windmill and solar hot water heater in 1977. They fed back electricity to the grid and watched their meter turn backwards. Con Edison, the local utility in New York City, sued them, and however, they were ultimately forced to accept the homegrown energy. And this was a landmark case that brought net metering to New York City. This decision that still makes local electricity generation possible in New York City was a major step to allow the decentralized renewable electricity generation in New York City itself. And of course, this is a big foundation of climate action and reducing greenhouse gas emissions in different buildings across the city. And that's why we launched this climate action pledge. This is a recent launch as of this summer, in sort of harking back to that history of climate action and sort of guerrilla energy generation. We've encouraged co-ops to sign the climate action pledge itself. This is along with the guidebook and it's a resource that we gathered. We gathered all the programs and resources provided by the city and utilities, state entities, and even ourselves and other CBOs. And this is usually a lot of scattered information. A lot of people have a hard time marketing these things, especially city agencies have a hard time marketing these things just to the regular folks. So we took it upon ourselves to just gather all this information, consolidate it, design it well enough where people can digest it themselves, and also have some sort of commitment attached to it. And the idea being that we'll sort of reignite that climate action momentum and enthusiasm that has been in HDFCs for a very long time, but we haven't necessarily emphasized this maybe in a very long time. And again, UHAB's mission is to empower low-income residents and to take control of their housing. And that mission is inherently intersectional and has included the value of environmental justice. And my hope is that we can continue to accomplish that mission through our work. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you, David, for giving us what is necessarily just a brief glimpse into the many initiatives that UHAB has taken and is taking. You're real pioneers in this field. And that's a bit daunting when I say that. I went to see a UHAB project in about 1977. I remember hearing about the selling electricity back to the grid. So you were pioneers then, and now in 2021 you're still pioneers, which kind of underscores the problem facing the world, because we've got to move from the pioneer stage to the stage where everybody is taking action. All housing is being retrofitted, for example. So we're going to have a round table discussion now, and I'll invite those of our panelists who participated online. So Anna and Aaron and David, I hope I'm not forgetting any of you. And then our panelists here on the stage, Thomas and Guido and Shido. I'm going to pose some questions and invite comments from all of you. We also have an open microphone, so if there is somebody in the audience present here who'd like to come to a mic and make a comment, ask a question, feel free to do that at any time. We're making good time in the session today, so we'll have time to take any questions. And we'll try to keep our eye on the chat on the online platform. In fact, if Julie could make a special effort to follow that, that would be helpful. And just let us know, Julie, if there's something that should be shared with a wider group. So just to kick things off, I'll start with a question. Oh, yes, good.
Muchas gracias, señora Wilson, por la posibilidad.
Thank you very much, Mrs.
Mi nombre es
Wilson, for this possibility. My name is Carlos Mancilla. I come from Argentina, from America. I'm the secretary of Housing Co-op, Falucho Co-op, It was created 51 years ago by my father and a group of friends. They didn't have their own houses, but our family bought this house through this mechanism. I have my house through this mechanism. It's the third generation now, and we use the cooperative model in order to have our own flat and houses. We are very, very grateful to the ICA World Board, because housing is one of the most important topics, and we are very happy with this clever cooperation between energy co-ops and housing co-ops. Our co-op, by agreement on the sixth principle, is a member of a federation of cooperatives, UNICOP, and another federation of a housing co-op in the Matanza district. It's a very popular area in Argentina at the outskirts of Buenos Aires. We all want to cooperate because we are part of the Confederation of Argentinian Cooperatives. Mr. Arcos, he's the chairman of the World ICA. We do participate in the network of housing cooperatives in America. Our friend Wilson has known about this. We want to thank you for your support. Anders Lago was also around here, so we feel at home here in Seoul. We are very happy to be here in the World Network for Housing Co-ops. I'd like to underline that the housing problems are something that appear in all the world and all the countries. We have great diversities. We have different experiences in the more marginal areas of the world, which do not have housing, no houses, lack of housing. And our dear Europe is another model. They in Europe, they're thinking about solar panels, energy, because they have housing. And for us, it's a guide. Several years ago, we visited Reskop with our friend Dirk. He was just there on the video. And for us, Europe is always very inspiring, and it's a guidance. But for this debate, for these 3 months ahead of us, we need to discuss about public policies that may allow families and households to have their flats and homes. Because at least in my country, 25% of the population is renting their flats. And if we compare with other countries, it's a good figure. If we compared with another type of countries, it's a bad figure. There's a great diversity. We have experiences in America. We'll fit in Central America, in the more marginalized country. And we have also experiences like the public Egypt policy. They were here with us, sharing with us. They built cities, and 20% of the building of these cities is done through the cooperative figure. I'd like to underline this fact because we in America, and that's why I would like to contribute to this discussion that we will have for 3 months now, is that in fact housing is not goods and businesses and real estate business and profit. We need to have another vision, and that's what we want to convey. That's what we want to contribute to this debate. The experience of effort in Central America with our cooperatives in Argentina, the co-ops in Uruguay with a public financing system, public policies through cooperatives, mutual help, the FECOBI co-op, the very good experience of Chilean cooperatives with long-term investment through credits and loans, and the problem of Palo Alto in Mexico. This cooperative is fighting against the economic and financial growth that does not allow for collective property in Mexico. There was a historical co-op in Mexico. So we have a great variety of different forms of housing cooperatives, different operations. And in America, we would like to contribute with all this. Talking about the energy cooperatives, Gisela Wild is here from the electrical cooperatives in Argentina. We have a system for electricity and power distribution and generation in Argentina. It's based on cooperatives too. All the city is the partner of an electricity co-op, and these people are now installing panels, wind power installations, and we started full work between the power co-ops and housing co-ops. Mr. Echarre is online. It's 12 hours from here. It's the middle of the night, but they are also working with us. We are all contributing to this. This link between generation and distribution of electricity co-ops and housing co-ops, it's important because we are the consumers of that energy. And in my cooperative in Tandem City, we have an agreement that we signed with an innovation company. It's called Bioceres for the production of solar panels using rice waste and wheat waste. So that's to build the houses. We are proposing to do that with a special panel, which is wheat and rice. It's stubble in English, stubble. And we think that we will reduce the carbon footprint because the materials with which we build the houses are eco-friendly, and this is a saving. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to congratulate you all for this space that you're offering us for this 3 months where we will have the opportunity to work online in order to give our conclusions to our dear ICA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for contributing that perspective. Okay, so we'll go to the first question for the panel. I want to start by saying that housing cooperatives are almost always formed in response to a need for secure, affordable housing that isn't being well met by the private sector. In some countries, this means providing affordable access to home ownership. In others, it means renting out housing to the cooperative's members on fair and secure terms. So housing co-ops need to take steps to reduce their energy consumption. This is clear. Of course, when we build new housing, we need to build it to the most up-to-date standards vis-a-vis energy conservation, and we should do it in such a way that we avoid using fossil fuels. Most of the housing that most people live in now is still going to be on the ground for a long time to come. So we have to retrofit the existing stock. Now, the question for the panel is, will members of housing cooperatives who are at the end of the day concerned with how much they have to pay to live in their co-op, will they resist initiatives to retrofit buildings if this means that their housing cost is going to go up? And I'm going to ask you, Guido, to lead off in answering that question.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Alexandra. And I do think I can also come back to Carlos Mancachina. The problem is we are a large rental housing cooperative. The mission statement of our cooperative is that we have to meet the 3 A's. That means the supply of adequate housing, accessible housing, and especially affordable housing, as we are working for more or less low income people as our members to a maximum to the mid-class income in our membership. And what's my experience of the last 20 years working in this cooperative is that we, in the first step, have to communicate. And that meets also with the fact Aaron just told us, that it's always or could always be a problem when you outline social or economic benefits that might get very, very fast critical. And so what I presented today was a very good example for us, and that was a long process of experiences, although of not so good experiences on that way with energetic refurbishment. And what I could show here is a little bit gathering the low-hanging fruits, because we had the possibility to replace central gas heating, which was more than 20 years old and was inefficient. The dimension was much too big in that time, and we could replace it through the cogeneration unit, and we can now be much cheaper in operating expenses. And to be absolutely honest, for most of our members, our customers, it's the most urgent issue is, will we have a reliable rent development in the next years? And when we can show that, and when we can communicate that, they won't resist against anything. So that's, on the other hand, it's quite interesting, because a lot of tenants and members of our cooperative are absolutely interested, for example, in cogeneration. We do that at a lot of places. And a lot of these members says, okay, cogeneration makes me independent from the local energy supplier, for example. And when you are my energy supplier, I can rely on this, and that's for me a very good fact. And so they also they honor the carbon dioxide savings through these measures. But first of all, the rents must keep affordable for them. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to hear your perspective, David, because you're very focused on meeting the needs of a low-income clientele. You mentioned that a great number of the buildings that have been acquired by the co-ops that you work with are using oil. So, what's your perspective on this question? How do you help your members make their buildings more environmentally friendly, while remaining affordable?
You're asking me, how do I do my job? Essentially, that's what I'm employed to do. But a lot of it starts with the education piece. You know, a lot of the jargon around the environmental industry, you know, and you could sort of slice it up into the solar and heat pumps and cogen, and even just the fossil fuel industry itself with the heating oil boilers or the gas boilers. All that has its own jargon that is sort of outside of its of the, I guess, regular day-to-day ethos. And education is super important. What we've noticed over the last year or so, since we launched our Clean Heat for Co-ops campaign, is that from day one, nobody knew what electrification meant. Nobody knew what heat pumps were. Now, this heating season, starting around October 1st in New York, we're seeing a lot of requests and inquiries for heat pumps, electrified heating systems. How do I get away from fossil fuels? So this knowledge and information really is saturating, I guess, the market, and people are coming to us interested in it. However, you know, what Guido was saying is pretty consistent with what I'm working with, is that it's very difficult to keep the affordability of everything, with the economics of the upgrade just don't make sense, right? And let alone there's also questions about homeowners going into debt to afford whatever they want to upgrade to. You know, I think there's the other implications about whether certain buildings should be in more debt than their property is even valued, if we're looking at sort of a speculative market, right? So it's one, it's important to think about the education piece and make sure that the folks that are implementing any sort of technology are making an informed decision moving forward. But the other, I think, is definitely just meeting people where they're at, right? I spoke with a building today that's actually in distress, has a lot of debt, and they're looking to cut costs, they're looking to save money. They're on heating oil, they're small builders. My immediate recommendation isn't necessarily, let's get solar panels, let's get heat pumps, let's get you lower your greenhouse gas emissions and make you as compliant, but also as sustainable as possible. First I want to make sure that they're financially stable, their governance structure is able to make decisions. This building in particular actually is still consistently paying with cash and checks and refuses to have an online presence. And so that's also part of my job, to make sure that people and the cooperators themselves are, coming to this century, I guess, and making sure that they're able to communicate with whatever businesses are going to do the upgrades that they need, right? So the education piece is important, and the access piece is important for the financial and the technological access is super important. So we're helping a lot of buildings navigate a lot of this process. On a day-to-day, we're really taking it one step at a time, having a meeting about solar, have a meeting about budgeting, have a meeting about loan packaging, and just taking it slowly but surely. But there is definitely an enthusiasm and an engagement inherently in a cooperative housing, that they want to take the next step in ownership and sustainability. And as I've mentioned, that historical case study is that people have been wanting to do this. People that are taking control of their own lives want to continue to have control of their own lives, right? So it is something that people are engaged and enthusiastic about.
Excellent. I'm wondering, Aaron, whether you have a perspective to share on this, being involved in energy cooperatives, very much on the forefront, trying to promote change and rapid change, but also living in a housing cooperative. So pretty familiar, I'm guessing, with the culture of a housing cooperative and the challenges that co-ops sometimes have in fact in making change. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would certainly agree with a lot of what David and Guido have said so far. I would think, David talked a lot about from the co-op's perspective. I would also say that there's an educational role for the technical or the contractor or the engineer, as the case may be, right? A lot of folks out in the world are not as familiar with the housing program model in attendance today are, and so I think it's important that they understand how, the governance structure is sort of set up, and all these kinds of things are go along towards just developing positive working relationships for the kinds of projects that ultimately are going to end up being, if they take it to sort of the nth degree, can be very disruptive, sort of to the living environment. There's common terms and common vision from the get-go. I think that goes a long way. I would certainly say that, I myself have seen and my own housing co-op that there's definitely that sort of, I won't say resistance to change, because I think it's more of just, as David touched on, there's a lot of technologies thrown around, there's a lot of language thrown around that can't be starting with some of the measures, by not using the opportunities that come with bundling, something like a quick payback, like an LED lighting retrofit. There's going to be very quick paybacks for the most part, those kinds of things. Bundling that with something like a heat pump pilot project, maybe to introduce members to what that technology looks like and feels like in their home, is maybe a valuable sort of step to get people on board. So, obviously, myself coming from the environmental sector more so than maybe the co-op sector in some ways, the pace of the change is never going to be as fast as one might like, but I think, there's a lot of merit and value in taking those steps, doing the education, setting up those relationships to succeed rather than to be combative down the line. I think there's there's a lot of opportunity to do it that way. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you for that perspective. That takes me really to my next question. So we can see that if we sort of stand back and look objectively, we're at a very early stage here, aren't we? If we think about housing cooperatives and what they need to do, and the formation of community-based energy cooperatives and the opportunities for collaboration between the two. Okay, we don't have very much time, right? The world has to. We got to crack this problem of climate change, and this means it really does mean electrifying the entire housing stock and lickety split, as we say in English, very fast. So I think there's a risk that regulatory action, which is frankly been in short supply, could overtake us. So, for example, in France in 2019 adopted an Energy Climate Act, and it sets out increasingly strict energy standards that owners of residential properties have to meet. Under that act, from 2028 onwards, whenever you sell or rent a property whose energy consumption exceeds a certain threshold, the owners of the property will be required to mention non-compliance with this obligation in the advertisements relating to the sale or the rental of the property. So you can see this is meant to put pressure on owners of property, whether they live in it themselves or whether they rent it out, to take the requisite measures to improve the efficiency, the energy efficiency of their property. Okay, from a date still to be set, property owners will be prohibited from renting out housing that does not conform to strict energy conservation standards. Other countries may follow suit. So, housing cooperatives aren't known for, we do good things, but we do them slowly. I'll put it that way. It should be a while before Canada adopts a law like this, but it's already on the books in France, and it's likely to spread. So I'll start with you, Guido. What are the implications of this? You own more than 7,500 units of housing. If Germany follows in that direction, what are you going to need to do in order to accelerate your progress?
A difficult question, huh? Thanks for that. We are proceeding the energetic refurbishment. That's the first statement. But keeping in mind the affordability and keeping in mind also the truth that we are only working with our existing building stock, already existing building stock. So we try to prevent to build new flats, and so we have a building stock of 7,500 dwellings, and we have to refurbish them again and again. And we have in Germany a very particular situation, because in 2050 we are facing the fact that we have to be net zero, or better said, no more greenhouse gas emission, also from the already existing building stock. And that will only work, especially for a cooperative like ours, with a huge supply with district heating from a municipal power unit. This will only work when we will get artificial substances instead of gas, for example, instead of natural gas. So we have to think about hydrogen. Is that the correct word? Yes. Instead of natural gas, and that is really urgent for us, because we cannot lower the greenhouse gas emission in an existing building stock to 0%. That's impossible for us, because that you will only reach with net zero energy new build flats, and that's impossible for us and also for our dwellers.
So I'd like to ask you, Thomas, your thoughts on this subject.
The situation is a bit different in Quebec. Almost all the co-ops are already electrified. we have mainly a challenge of air conditioning, because there's a lot of heat now during the summer, and like there's a lot of people having health problems because of that. So right now in Quebec, there's a lot of subsidies and grants to have really green projects. So we could, like, I'm with the energy co-op I'm working it, which is a worker co-op. So we install a system like geothermal systems, solar panels, and we also with co-ops we try to offer energy as a service. So there's no capitalization needed for some of the project, because we have a lot of patient capital in Quebec. Like the green and the climate change is something we tackled a while ago. So there's a lot of products and solutions. So now we are retrofitting a lot of co-ops over the province, and we're trying to put air conditioning and stuff like that. And in the new projects, more and more, we try to implement geothermal heat pump systems. You also have to know that in Quebec, like the vast majority of electric production is hydroelectric. So every time we reduce the consumption in Quebec, we can sell our green energy to the States or to the rest of Canada. So it's a very, like, I think we feel like the challenge is quite different for us right now. So yeah.
Now, Shido, what about you?
Well, listening to the initiatives out there by co-ops on energy, and thinking about what is happening in Seoul, the energy consumers, they're exploiting the power plants in the rural areas and in the local areas. So the energy consumers in Seoul, they are taking advantage of the rural areas, and so they're destroying arable land in local areas to build power plants to produce electricity that is consumed in Seoul. So that's unviable and unsustainable structure. So we have to think up of alternatives, but geothermal energy production or hydroelectricity production will not be feasible in a very densely populated urban area like Seoul, but we will have to decentralize. And we have to think about the political system right now in Korea and how we should approach the problem of governance. So I'm getting a lot of food for thought through this panel.
1 minute away from the scheduled time, the end time of our session, but I've been advised that there's some kind of emergency situation, and we've been asked to stay in this room 20 minutes beyond the end of the session. So, you know, we'll hear more, but I think it means we can just keep the session going. I mean, if we have to spend the next 20 minutes together, let's get something out of it. Okay, so don't leave the room. That's the real message there. And I wanted to know whether, Anna, you'd like to come into this conversation. Tell us your thoughts.
Yes, I can come back. I have to say that we are at the start of both energy and housing co-ops in our part of the world, and maybe it's interesting to understand the context in which we operate. So I would like to say that from the perspective of energy co-ops and from the perspective of citizens' energy, maybe what is interesting to mention is why they are coming up and why they are relevant in our part of the world. So on one hand, people want to take action in terms of energy transition. And I come from one of the most polluted cities in the world today. So energy transition is very important also for the clean air, and energy production in hands of citizens is one of the ways to get to that. So there is really the drive of people to actually produce clean energy is also connected very much to not just to reduction of CO2 emissions, but also to to the pollution which is present everywhere, especially in bigger cities. And another thing is that people want to take control also of the energy production and energy democratization, and also to somehow take back this basic infrastructure to their own hands because of the privatization also of the whole energy sector. And energy independence as well as an important factor in all of this. And maybe what is also very relevant to come back to, and that was mentioned in the beginning, is the rising energy prices. This summer we had quadrupled energy prices in the part of Europe where I come from. This has brought a number of companies really to the edge of their existence and basically deciding even if they're going to continue or not. This has not yet spilled over to the households, but there is really expectation that the energy price will be enormously rising and much quicker than it was expected. And this is also something that I guess housing cooperatives should take in account. As Guido was also speaking and the others were also mentioning the price on that, if this has on affordability and the impact on affordability, but the really rise of energy prices will have quite a big impact, and we have to think in terms of actually including this energy price in the future also price of housing as an important factor. And therefore also our starting pioneering housing cooperatives in this part of the world are thinking of this energy efficiency, high energy efficiency from the very start. Also in production of energy from the very beginning. I mean, we have at this point, because we are, let's say, the first ones here, we have a luxury, let's say, to think from scratch, which is not the advantage of those that already have a huge housing stocks already. But in these terms, for those that are just starting, I think that very important is to think of a reduction of demand in terms both of energy and also of the use of space. So let's say what is the standard of living is probably also going to shrink for the new energy cooperatives.
Thank you. Very interesting perspective. And David, I'm thinking that this is probably quite interesting for you to hear from our colleague from Korea, for example, and the Europeans who are with us. Thinking a little bit about your environment, my mind goes to air conditioning because New York City is already hot, and it promises to get a lot hotter. Are your co-ops, your co-op members, what do they do to cope with the summer temperatures? And how do you see this? If the overall goal is to reduce energy consumption, what do we do about rising temperatures and people needing to be able to cope with those temperatures?
Don't forget about the humidity as well. You know, the majority of people in Europe that are using air conditioning, they're typically using, unless they're, you know, a new office building, they're using the window units, right? The plug in, they put it in the window, and you see them in like 50-story buildings, and incredibly inefficient. Recommending heat pumps, right? Heat pumps are sort of running in a similar technology, using refrigerants to move air from to and from outside, inside, or vice versa. But I think outside of the technology itself, I think New York State in general, maybe just New York City, needs to be a lot more creative in their initiatives and their funding mechanisms. Right now, a lot of the what the state entity has been funding is technological solutions for reducing energy consumption or making it either more efficient or greener, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions themselves. But there are also other things that can be done. You know, soil regeneration, green roofs, blue roofs, rain capturing technology, all these sorts of things, community gardens as well, native wildlife, native plant and wildflowers rather. All these things are incredibly important to reduce the urban heat island effect in New York City. And some of these initiatives have been happening, such as the Cool Roofs projects, where they're really just trying to paint a lot of the roofs in New York City platinum or a lighter reflective color to reduce the heat intensity inside the buildings. But, you know, as people were mentioning before, the majority of the buildings that need to lower their emissions in New York City already exist. They're upwards of 100 years old when they were built. And so you can't sort of put a centralized AC or heating system, or heating system already exists, but the centralized air conditioning can't, probably won't exist in these buildings. And so you need to have these creative solutions, not necessarily outside of the built environment, and think about it in a ecological perspective rather than a hard urban planning, how engineering is going to solve these problems for us. And so that's what I would recommend. There's a lot of good work in New York, specifically in Brooklyn, happening with composting, solid waste recycling, and organics recycling. But a lot of the indications sometimes the composting organics program in New York City was defunded, and to my knowledge, probably hasn't been reinstated. In addition to different state initiatives, are again only gearing towards the engineering solutions. The other thing I was going to mention, that the community credit, so basically a tax credit that people can get for going solar. It's part of the incentives and tax credits when you convert your building or you install solar panels. And that has been taken away, and sort of counterintuitive to the state goals of reducing 80% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And so the intention or the political will need to match whatever the political
Got our work cut out for us, don't we? I'd like to explore a little bit more, turning to you, Anna, the opportunity for cooperation between energy cooperatives and housing cooperatives. After listening to our discussion, what do you think?
I think there is a great opportunity for cooperation, and maybe one example that I just learned about a few days ago is in Slovenia, where there's a cooperation of energy cooperative, housing cooperatives, and milk production cooperative, where they are working on preparing a project of 1,000 apartments that they would develop together. So this is an interesting example, maybe something to follow. So where different cooperatives take on different aspects of such a project. I also know of some other examples that could be relevant, like for instance in Rotterdam, where I'm also somehow related and partially I am living. There is initiative to connect neighborhood energy production through cooperatives with existing energy cooperatives. So I think that also to produce not just the electricity or the heating for the cooperative itself, but also to be a seed of energy production for the neighborhood of transition for instance, from the gas usage to electricity for heating in the neighborhood.